Dancing cats. This is going to go viral. Outstanding. Good afternoon and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Coast EVs, your fortnightly fast charge on electric vehicles and infrastructure. I'm joined this evening once again by my fellow co-host, Mr. Walter Schulte, down in North Carolina, just below us here, and the evil genius that is Mr. Eric Way, out in California with his cat ranch, I guess. So everybody has their companions here this evening. We're got a good topic lined up for you, something that everyone has wanted to talk about for a long time in Plug&Charge. So we'll get to that as soon as we've covered the usual formalities. One of which is the audio available next day on your favorite podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, anywhere that you can get streaming audio. You can catch up with the show if you missed it the night before. And what else do I have? A quick plug for EV infrastructure newsletter, which I'm running every week now, every Sunday pretty much. So that's on Sunday kind of lunchtimes. That'll go out, catch up your weekly news, does Walter's weekly updates, kind of piggybacks off those on the DC fast charging side, get some latest numbers, interesting sites, all the pieces of news that we've covered. One of which last week was the rather kind of soft launch, I would say, because it hasn't really been heralded yet, but Walmart Energy was unveiled. If you follow Landon at the Arkansas e-Traveler channel, you'll definitely have seen this, because he and the EV Texans have been roaming around Dallas-Fort Worth, finding all these cool sites. But essentially, Walmart Energy, let me bring up the picture of the site in McKinney, Texas, I believe it was, if I can find it here. Yeah, so just north of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, we have this one site in McKinney, which is a Walmart supercenter. It's actually a kind of test bed for a lot of energy initiatives that Walmart has put in. They had some of their first solar panels, some of their first wind turbines at this store, but as you can see there, all lined up, the ultrasonic hyperchargers ready to deliver electrons to anyone with a CCS1 or NACS handled vehicle. And by all accounts, they're working. It's a soft launch. We haven't had anything that's a big formal announcement yet. But Walter, this is one of your long-time baby projects that you kind of moved on to Landon because he's in the area. But I think we want to hear your reaction to this first, really.
Yeah, it's a bit of a blind spot to me now because I really have handed it over and favorited all my Plug&Share pips. And basically, I turn to Landon anytime I'm looking for an update. He's done a terrific job of keeping track of it. And it's been very fluid recently. There's been all kinds of announcements coming out. He did a terrific job of spotting the, what is called the New Year meeting. I forgot the acronym that they use for their convention which took place in Orlando, where they were debuting the name of the entity, which is Walmart Energy, and I wonder where they got that from. But so lots of things going on, and in the midst of all that, someone let leak out that one of the stations was going to be opening in hours, at least from what I understand. And definitely go take a look at Landon's channel. He does a terrific job of spelling out the sequence of events superbly. So what we're looking at now is a station that is pushing electrons. It is energized with alpitronic hyperchargers direct with Walmart wrappings at a DFW supercenter, with many more friends getting ready to join the party in DFW. And then the sky's the limit. Who knows where it's going to go next?
I think one of the pricing points I'd seen was 42 cents per kilowatt hour, which is pretty reasonable by our standards. Down in Texas in general, I think it's a little bit cheaper. I know Iona launched with 34 cents per kilowatt hour welcome pricing. Mercedes has put a lot of sites down there at 40 cents, so it's right in line, good price, and looks like it'll be competitive for the equipment that they've got on site. Eric, you certainly have been to Walmart, much like I have with Electrify America. What are you thinking? It's obviously very early days, but how are you thinking about the project and the kind of slowly catch a monkey start here?
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the things that came out, and again, make sure you check out Landon's channel. He's in the chat right now, Arkansas e-Traveler, but they were deciding on a hardware provider too. So with the the ABB chargers as well. So I mean, I think I'm fine with spending a little bit of extra time planning and then executing. So and I've always been of the opinion that, as much as we sort of bemoan the current Electrify America Walmart locations, I think that they're going to be a crucial location moving forward, not necessarily for travelers, but for local communities. And that's something I think Walter has called out too in a lot of the data sets that he's looked at, that the greatest need for charging support is actually going to be more in communities than it is necessarily for travelers. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And then of course I have a bunch of local Walmarts in my area that I'll be keeping an eye out. And what I'm really hoping, and this is one of the things that I don't think Walmart ever gets enough credit for, is they do tend to focus on the more rural and underserved communities. That's where they get their inroads. And even in California, a lot of the biggest gaps that we have in public charging infrastructure are in towns that feature a Walmart. And so I'm hoping that they're paying attention to this too when they do their planning and saying, hey, look, here's a Walmart and there's no public charging infrastructure within 150 miles and it's located in California. Maybe we should put a charger there. So I'm looking forward to seeing how they move forward with this. So yeah, I'm not going to begrudge anybody who gets started, even if they're started a little slow. So
yeah, well, it's a good point as well. As we talk about the federal funds potentially slipping away, I don't think that will be the case in California. They've put together the EVIP plan that's going to, with Cal EVIP, I guess, Caltrans, I lose track of the acronyms, but there's 55 million going for fast charging over there. But even then, rural areas can be difficult to reach, and NEVI was kind of to plug some of those gaps. Walmart has the pockets and the incentive to kind of do that in certainly in some areas. They're not going to plug all the gaps, but I think one of the original data points was that 90% of the US population lives within 10 miles of a Walmart, something along those lines. So that's your kind of EV base that you really want covered from a trip that's common for a lot of people in those regions, as you point out.
Yeah.
Well, we're just excited, really, I think is the underscore. There's not a network out there yet, but it does kind of give you the trappings of one, as Landon jumped in there saying that Murphy is also on deck. He's got sites near him in Bentonville, and there's a bunch more supercenters that are looking to go live. So if this is a success, hopefully that will kickstart a lot of action around Walmarts in that area and beyond. So we won't belabor it, but definitely happy with that and excited to see that roll out. Let me jump through some of the intros of the folks who have already jumped into the chat here quickly. Then we'll move on to our main topic, which is something that everybody has been asking about for months here. So excited to go. Let's see. So we have Wilson Leandro. Hello from Pottsville, Pennsylvania. Bill B down in Tampa, Florida in his Audi e-tron. Cecil Martin in Cary, North Carolina. Hello. RHL Marines. Good evening from Savannah, Georgia. Doug Stevenson. Hello from British Columbia. Very high EV adoption over there, I'm hearing. So you must be doing well with the BC Hydro chargers, I hope. Paul in Bakersfield, California, 2020 Bolt, another day in paradise, indeed. We already said hello to Landon at the Arkansas e-Traveler channel. Definitely go over there and check out the Walmart coverage from himself and the EV Texans. Should get a plug as well for their great legwork in the DFW area. Robert Kirschner, hello from Halifax. I'm guessing that's Halifax, perhaps, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, and there's actually a town called that. Andy Getch down in Fort Myers, Florida, welcome. Brian Ribby drives electric up in Minnesota. Good evening. Happy Wednesday to you as well. Jean-Michel Dufour, bonsoir. I'm going to do this, Walter. Repentigny, Quebec. I hope I didn't butcher that. Apologies. Mike in SoCal, back home with his bevs. Congratulations for getting back. I hope all is well with you after a fun trip. Mark Barringer, Newcastle, Canada. Apparently the most wonderful people is all we'll say, because I love Canada very much. We are your friends, I promise. Scott Owens, who helped get tonight rolling, so thank you for the inspiration. Burlington, Massachusetts, not far from me at the moment, so we should grab coffee if you're here for a bit. But thank you for joining us and suggesting the chat. Let's see, Yitzhak Kabinski down in South Florida, and Ken R joining from Sarnia, Ontario, still not the 51st state. So thank you for so many Canadians joining in. We value you and we'll stay on your good side, I promise. So thank you for joining. Thank you for introducing yourself. I want to bring up our main guest tonight to help us unpack the confusing world of Plug&Charge, but he'll have as many answers as we can ask questions, I hope. So welcome to Nate Steele from Hubject. You're going to obviously have a lot of questions here, so I hope we can get to all of them, but thanks for joining us, Nate, and maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself and the company just to kind of get us started on the topic.
Yeah, of course. Hey, Steve. Hey, all. Really excited to be here tonight. You know, I have been doing nothing but talk about Plug&Charge for the better part of almost 3 years now. And it's kind of scary how quickly you can dream, live, and talk all things about one charging communication standard. Nonetheless, excited to be here, and as you mentioned, really hoping we can, myself, can do our best at educating and raising awareness about Plug&Charge and what's going on here in North America and all things related to it. You know, maybe just to get quickly started here and give you a little bit of background. So, as mentioned, I've been on the team now for about 3 years, and for those of you that may not be familiar with Hubject, what we do is we are ecosystem operators, all right? And a lot of what our products focus on is how do we interconnect to many of the different players in the e-mobility space and provide charging features and functionalities that are associated with that. And we really do that through 2 global ecosystems. So the first global ecosystem is a roaming platform, which allows drivers to charge at different charging stations and networks without needing multiple accounts. And then the second ecosystem that we operate is a Plug&Charge ecosystem, which is focused on secure, automated charging and authentication, right? So tonight, I think we'll focus largely on the Plug&Charge bit, but I think it's important to know we do both Plug&Charge and roaming, focused on charging authentication and charging authorization.
That's great. I kind of started to get into that side of the website that I just put up, the hubject.com, where folks can check out after. But there's a whole other piece that we maybe have another episode to do, so we'll have to talk after. But tonight, Plug&Charge is our pet topic. So I guess we kind of have a feel for the company a little bit. Maybe you could tell us, give us a little bit if there's a 10,000-foot view, just to kind of, for anyone who's new to the technology or who has heard it, but like myself, I don't really have a vehicle in my Ioniq 5 that is capable of it just yet, or at least hasn't been activated on most of the networks. Maybe you can give us kind of a potted history of how it got to where we are today and what you've seen over all that time you've been talking about it.
Yeah, of course. I think the terms or the word phrase Plug&Charge gets thrown around a lot. So if we actually take it back one step farther, we're really talking about one standard, and this standard is ISO 15118. And this is the standard that defines vehicle to charger communication. And Plug&Charge is just one of those value-added functionalities that's built into this standard. So when we're talking about Plug&Charge, and specifically Plug&Charge that's supported by Hubject, this is what we're talking about. And that is this experience of where a driver just plugs in the vehicle and then that session automatically begins, right? You don't have to tap an RFID card. You don't have to do anything in the app. You don't have to swipe a credit card. You just plug it in, the session begins. Now, when we start and kind of look at ISO 15118, while Plug&Charge is the main piece that we talk about, it does lay the groundwork for a lot of other important functionalities, such as V2X, smart charging, multi-account handling. So I think it's really exciting as well, not only from the functionality that it provides today, but what we see is kind of this long-term build out as we're talking about ISO 15118 and plug-and-charge adoption as an industry. But today, why is it important, or why do we see this increased awareness and this increased adoption? Really, it's the customer experience. It's the driver experience that's starting to really be the focus. And I think as we look at in terms of a lot of partners, why do they choose to partner with Hubject or to work with Hubject to implement Plug&Charge? Well, because it's the most reliable and seamless form of charging authentication on the market today. It's easy for the driver. We're seeing lower failure rates of sessions that are authenticated using Plug&Charge. And so ultimately that's the goal that we're working towards, right? The seamless charging experience. And this is what we're working towards as well when we're talking about ISO 15118. So yeah.
So that's I mean, it dates back as far as my reading goes, and please correct me if I'm wrong because you've been in it a lot more and a lot longer than I have. But you're going back about 10 years here, right? Sorry, my lights are switching off. I'll have to arrange that in a sec. Yeah, but it's going back to kind of 2013 and 2014, right? As far as the ISO 15118 standard, and that's obviously a lot. That's most of the North American kind of EV development. Maybe you can give us kind of where we've got to today, the current state of Plug&Charge, and what we can move on to questions after that. But just give us a potted history, at least, of the North American kind of piece of how Plug&Charge has got to where it is today.
Yeah, of course. So, I think when we talk about the early standards development, you're right. It has been quite a long time. I think when we start looking at when we actually started seeing Plug&Charge in the field and when we actually started seeing sessions, it was in around 2019. So Hubject partnered initially actually with Electrify America as our first network to enable this experience in North America and within the US. And, I think they did a really great job and were a really great partner to work with as part of that initial rollout and trying to drive that experience within the North American market. And then, what we've really seen in terms of adoption is probably the next major wave was the NEVI funding. So because of some of the carve-outs in NEVI that specified Plug&Charge or specified ISO 15118, we saw a lot of early adoption from, or kind of that next wave of adoption from charging networks, beginning to lay the foundation, beginning to integrate with Hubject to roll that experience. And then I think what is really exciting now is we're just now starting to see more of these networks go live. So when we start talking numbers and who we're working with within the North American market, we have 14 automotive OEM brands that are committed to having Plug&Charge enabled vehicles on the road by the end of this year. We're working with 25 charging networks, primarily across the US and Canada, and 7 different backend providers within the market. If we're talking, what does that look like in terms of number of vehicles on the road or number of chargers on the road? That's looking to be around 100,000 chargers that are either onboarded or onboarding. That's about 250,000 active drivers on the road today, and 800,000 enabled vehicles on the road as well. So I think a lot of times we get focused and everyone's saying, hey, Nate, when is Plug&Charge the future? Like, when is it happening? And quite frankly, the answer is it's happening now. Whether you realize it or not, as many of these NEVI funding stations are going live, they are Plug&Charge enabled. And we're starting to see those slowly begin to come online. And we're starting to see that experience become more proliferated than some of those early partners as well.
So I'm sure there are hands being raised all across the comments here of when's my vehicle, when's my manufacturer, when's my charging network or favorite charging network going to be rolling that out. So we will get to them. I promise we're coming. But I wanted to make sure we set the stage for where we've been and where we've got to now, and also to kind of clear up any. You touched upon the distinctions of how many different types of plugging in and charging. The problem is a lot of them are called Plug&Charge, so it kind of does exactly what it says on the tin there. But we have stuff like Autocharge on Autocharge Plus on EVgo, Plug&Charge, plug-in, various different versions, and then something with any prefix before charge. Maybe you could distinguish some of the common ones, especially that EVgo one, which a lot of us have used because it's a simpler thing that they've kind of rolled out very quickly to a lot of different models. And it's obviously got the similar functionality, something we've all enjoyed, but maybe you can kind of delineate the difference between the two and why Plug&Charge is the one that you've kind of, pushed towards at Hubject.
Yeah, certainly. I think a few years ago in particular, we saw a lot of conversation in the market and some adoption around another version of Plug&Charge, where our version is based on ISO 15118 and uses this whole idea of digital certificates. There's another version, which is also commonly referred to as Autocharge, that provides a similar type experience. I think really at the end of the day, the main differentiator here, though, is the level of security, particularly cybersecurity, that's associated with each of these. Where on the Autocharge side, we see a use of MAC IDs, right? On the Plug&Charge or ISO 15118 side, we're using digital certificates, we're using PKIs, and we're using kind of the next gen, more secure version of a very similar driver experience, right? When you start looking at kind of this proliferation of Autocharge or some of the initial conversations around it, it gets, I think, a little scary because you're relying on whitelisting MAC IDs, right? And that kind of opens your door, right? It's like giving your keys to someone on the street and hoping they don't know where you live and that they can't get in and that they don't walk in your house and cause harm. All we're doing is taking a lot of the similar features and functionalities, and then we're using a standards-based approach and coupling that with best cybersecurity practices to have that more secure charging experience, that more secure authentication experience.
And as I understand it, as in my reading, I was looking at, not all MAC IDs on cars are fixed, right? So there are some models that vary them around, so you're never going to see something like Autocharge Plus on those models.
Exactly. That's true. So that's a big call out with Autocharge, right? There are a lot of OEM brands that won't even support this based on the cybersecurity risks and how they rotate MAC IDs. Volkswagen's a common brand that's often called out in this. And to be honest, I've been doing this for 3 years now. I can't really think of very many automotive OEMs that are developing Autocharge as a functionality that they're trying to push out. It's more of a kind of a short-term stepping stone within the space. Now the long-term approach we're seeing is ISO 15118 based Plug&Charge. Right.
Yeah, I was going to say it came in the interim. It's been nice to have, but I think even now we're seeing EVgo saying that they will work on ISO 15118 as well and move towards that Plug&Charge standard, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're one of our partners, and that is also integrated within our ecosystem.
Gotcha. Well, EVgo is a good time to go to Walter for his questions because he's got the GM Energy EVgo background there and has done road trips with Plug&Charge. So I'm not going to put any words in your mouth, Walter. You can ask the questions that you've been burning to ask.
Yeah, so spoiled. It's so nice to be able to show up, plug in, and then go to the restroom and just know that the transaction's taking place and the car's starting a session. Without it is definitely a Debbie Downer. Several questions. I mean, so the process of innovating and solving for a problem that was in existence through a company that sees a venture in a burgeoning industry is what the country is built on. And there is no parallel in the gasoline industry where it's not, there's no electronics involved by necessity. You can't introduce electronics in a flammable liquid that's engineered to ignite when vaporized. That would be poor planning. So it's almost like we're turning the volume up a notch where people who are driving EVs will instead of being slammed for having long charging times, we'll now be the cool kids on the block that will have new technology that will enable us to be able to just plug in, walk away, and allow the authentication to take place. So definitely kudos for that. I mean, here we are initially getting knocked, but soon to be the cool kids on the block. But I did a little bit of research in a video not too long ago, and I should say prior to coming into this live stream, I went to the fount of all truth to research Hubject, which is YouTube. And I saw that you guys have videos out there for like 11 years ago or something. So you guys have been around a long time, which is really saying something in the EV industry. We see a lot of people come and go, but Hubject is still here. So how did that journey happen? I mean, how is Hubject still a viable entity through the twists and turns that have been the EV adoption curve?
Yeah, certainly. You know, I think I can certainly speak to war stories shared around water coolers, and then of course my direct experience the last 3 years. But you know, I think when we look at Hubject's beginning, right? You know, the better half of a little over a decade ago, it was evident even then that the industry was becoming fragmented, and there was a greater need for interoperable solutions, right? When we start looking at the amount of charging stations that were popping up, and the amount of charging networks that were popping up, especially in early markets like in Europe, as well as you're looking at the variants across different EV manufacturers, charger manufacturers, OEMs, it became clear you're starting to have all these different pockets, and it was becoming very difficult to authorize sessions across all the different partners. So if you recall earlier, I mentioned we have two product offerings. So we have the Plug&Charge ecosystem, and we have the roaming product. So that original focus was actually on that roaming product, where a driver picked their preferred app or their preferred payment solution, maybe associated with an RFID card, and then could pay on different charging networks. So that was kind of the Gen 1 solution that Hubject entered the market with, and that we provided within the greater e-mobility industry. And then I think as you move forward and you start looking at identifying what's next, I think that's something that our organization's been really good at doing. And that second piece was Plug&Charge. We saw ISO 15118. We saw a need that how could you simplify this payment experience, and how could you mitigate potential errors? And Plug&Charge was a very clear solution within the marketplace, and it naturally fit our role as an ecosystem operator. And then I think actually the third piece, which is probably the most exciting piece, is something that we announced at the beginning of this year, which is actually our financial services group, where we're starting to help support money transfer between all the different partners, right? Because that's kind of another major pain point within the industry. So I think, you know, at the end of the day, our journey has largely been this idea of how do you layer solutions on, as well as keep a forward-looking view of networks, right? When we actually talk about our roaming platform, we have over 1 million connected charge points within our ecosystem across 3 continents. So it's really exciting to see that growth and development. And now we're doing the same thing with Plug&Charge in the markets we operate.
Yeah, it's definitely a heavy lift to put in payment processing into a product mix. So best wishes on that. Hopefully that works out well. But I did want to mention that I recently did a research and video on something called Universal Plug&Charge announced by the Joint Office. And I'm assuming, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm assuming Universal Plug&Charge is distinct from what Hubject offers. Hubject is not Universal Plug&Charge, or are you the backend for Universal Plug&Charge?
Yeah, no, certainly. So I think when we look at that announcement that came out, golly, it was maybe a few months ago now.
Yes,
when it originally came out. There's been, I think, some kind of misunderstandings or some misconceptions associated with what exactly a universal Plug&Charge is, or a universal PKI is maybe the other term you might see. I think when we look at the market today, Hubject is the only company that operates a public and adopted plug-and-charge ecosystem in PKI in the market. I think we do acknowledge that there could be some other ecosystem players that may enter the space, but today it's just Hubject. That said, one thing that we work a lot with is we work with the SAE PKI initiative, which was part of this announcement, as well as with Charin. So as an industry, how do we create this global interoperable approach to plug-and-charge? So I think when you hear the terminology associated with a universal plug-and-charge approach, it's really talking about how do you have all these different ecosystems talk to each other. So should another PKI pop up, how could Hubject potentially communicate with this other PKI to ensure this global experience?
And just because there are acronyms flying all over the place, potentially, could you give us a quick definition of PKI, just for anyone who's in there?
Yeah, certainly. Sorry. So PKI, or public key infrastructure, just refers to these digital certificates that we use to identify and enable plug-and-charge. So I guess we could really get into the weeds, but just view it as the ecosystem that connects all the different players.
Yeah, just because it came up like 5 times, so I want to make sure we clarify it, because some people are listening as well. So if I put it in the chat, that won't help anybody at all.
Yeah, the alphabet soup of e-mobility terms, right? And they all use like the same.
That's what we needed more of, really. We needed some more of those in the EV world.
One easy way of understanding that before we pass to Eric is back in the day when there's HTTP, that was like the Autocharge Plus, and then the HTTPS is the ISO 15118 with the PKI. A little bit, so you got encrypted communication going on there. But anyway, sorry for interrupting.
No, solid shorthand for what we're trying to get across here. But Eric, you're on deck.
Oh boy, so yeah, lots of stuff. But yeah, so Nate, when you talked about Hubject started about 10 years ago, and so I know that this has kind of been an area of contention with like Chevy Bolt EV owners, right? So my car just passed its 8-year anniversary, and it's probably one of the most prevalent, at least CCS EVs on the road that doesn't have native ISO 15118. I believe it was basically published around that time. So you're even saying that Hubject kind of predated the official promulgation and official publication of ISO 15118, or is it right around that same time?
Yeah, I'd have to look at the exact dates on the standard side. So apologies to my naivety on the specific timelines. Our roaming offering though has been our established product for that full decade when we look back. The plug-and-charge piece is looking more towards like the last 3 to 5 years. In operation. Yeah. That's why
it's just interesting that all of those things started kind of happening right around the same time. But one area where I think that I'm a little bit, I feel like I'm still a little bit in the dark end because I'm seeing a lot of different information coming out. How many updates have there been to ISO 15118? And I've heard a lot of people talk about how not all ISO 15118 is the same, and just because you have it doesn't necessarily mean. And then there's, and then I think even with that communication about universal plug-in chargers, like an ISO 15118-2, which is now the new and improved. So I don't know if there's a quick and easy way to sort of clarify that for people so we can kind of understand, the generations or the versions of it and what we can expect. Yeah, no, that's a great question, Eric. I think when we talk about ISO 15118, there are actually really only 2 versions that we're referencing within the market. So it's -2 and it's -20. Today, anyone that is talking about ISO 15118 plug-in charge, they're likely talking about -2. We do not have any -20 chargers that are live within the world, I guess today, like within like that public ecosystem, right? So when we look at and we're talking about NEVI funding chargers, if we're talking about partners that we're advertising, like you could see on our website of who we're working with, those would be all -2 partners.
Dash 20 is kind of that next gen. There's a few other features and functionalities that are defined, that are built on Dash 2. But I think for the purpose of today's conversation and the purposes of focusing on the road and charging experience today, it's Dash 2.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I think what we were just getting used to is the lazy shorthand.
Exactly. So, in the market, exactly. So you could see ISO 15118, you could see 15118, you could see Plug&Charge, you could see Dash 2, all combination. Okay. It's largely referring to the same thing.
Okay. And then one of the other things too, and I'm sure Steve and Walter are tired of hearing me yap about this, but one of the big pain points that I foresee is not just app fatigue, right? Because Plug&Charge pretty much resolves app fatigue for the most part. You don't need to break out your phone. You don't really need to maintain an app or download it. You don't even need phone signal. But what comes with it is still what I would refer to as an account fatigue, right? So I have an account with this network, an account with that network. And for me, traveling on a 500, 600,000 mile trip, it's not unusual for me to use 5 to 6 different charging providers all on the same trip. And having an account with each and every one of those can be painful. So you were talking about possibly doing like a back-end financing. Is Hubject looking for a solution to that so that it's maybe just a single account payer and then it's just universally accepted? And if that's the case, and maybe this you might or might not be able to speak to, is the other pain point in that is if you don't have an account, you often miss out on member discount rates. You often end up having to pay additional fees, sometimes a connection fee, sometimes a session fee. So just in terms of how you're managing that, what's your strategy then for addressing that account fatigue and then the potential for missing out on discounts or savings if you have a single payer app for Plug&Charge?
Yeah, wow. Now we start to stray into the world of roaming. So this is where it gets the conversation gets a little hairy. But maybe let me do my best to describe the products and their roles, and then we can go into this whole idea of account fatigue. So when a driver pulls up to a charger, two things have to happen. The first thing that has to happen is authentication, right? The driver has to be able to identify themselves. And there are multiple different ways to authenticate, right? You can authenticate through tapping that RFID. You could authenticate through the credit card. You could swipe. You could authenticate through Plug&Charge, right? That's a form of authentication. By just plugging in the vehicle, the charger recognizes the charger and the account with that vehicle. Now, once you're identified, that transaction has to be authorized, right? And that means the charger needs to be, or the CPO needs to be able to communicate with the EMSP, or the entity that's holding the payment information for the driver. That authorization it can be done one of two ways. One, it's a bilateral OCPI integration. The second is it could occur actually through roaming, which comes back to this whole account fatigue idea, where a driver creates one account and they can roam across different networks, and they can authorize sessions across different networks. So when we're talking about a roaming platform, that's where Hubject actually has about 1 million charge points where people are able to roam, and that helps mitigate that account fatigue. Plug&Charge just simplifies that upfront bit of how do you authenticate yourself. Now, the important thing to drive home is when we're talking about Plug&Charge, you still have to authorize that session. So if someone has enabled Plug&Charge on their network and they can say they can provide Plug&Charge, you still have to authorize. So that's where that this whole idea of account fatigue or creating multiple accounts, you can have Plug&Charge and still have 10 different accounts, right? But if you have roaming and Plug&Charge, right, then you could have one account and that seamless method of authentication every time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, and that's what I was kind of curious about, because I know this is my Autocharge experience with the Bolt EV, but my account through GM is what enables that auto charge, right? But right now it's a single with EVgo. I have my account through EVgo. They talk to each other. Like you said, it's authorizing my payment, but they also list ChargePoint as a potential future. So if they do auto charge, then I'd still have to have a ChargePoint account so that my GM app could connect to it. So, yeah, I know that it's complicated. But like you said, that roaming aspect of it, I think, is going to be maybe key. And then maybe really far looking, and I'm going to, maybe pilfer a little bit from one of the chat comments, but also I was thinking about a different one as well, because they were asking about level 2 AC, which level 2 AC doesn't, and as far as I understand, it doesn't inherently have ISO 15118 or the ability to authenticate. But the other aspect of that I also consider is wireless charging, because there's also sort of a movement for people to say, well, why do we need to plug in at all? And what's even more, what's more convenient than plug and charge? Well, not plug in and charge, right? So like the so I don't know if there's a potential for that in the future as well, authenticating non-DC charge sessions, I guess would be the easiest way to put that.
Yeah, so it's funny you mentioned that. So it's actually a bit of a misconception. So there are AC chargers on the market that are capable of plug and charge. So it is not focused solely just on DC chargers. In fact, we work with quite a few companies right now, actually, in our test lab and doing some testing now on AC plug and charge. I think the use cases tend to be a little bit different at this stage within the market. Where we're actually seeing a lot of demand for this is on fleet charging, because a lot of fleets don't want their fleet drivers to have a phone in their vehicle, right? That's a liability. They don't want their driver interacting with it. They would just much rather have a more traditional fuel card, or better yet, there's no fuel card. You get rid of that. There's less risk for fraud, and their drivers can just plug in at the public charger. They can just plug in at the home charger. They can just plug in at the depot charger, and actually be able to track the energy usage, not only to the driver account, but also to the vehicle, because there's actually a lot of analytics that are associated with this. So I think, when we start looking forward, DC charging was really just the early adopter of plug and charge. Now we're starting to see that roll out in the AC space, driven by fleet, but I suspect passenger vehicles will follow quite quickly on that too.
That does actually dovetail with one of the comments there, probably where Eric pulled it from, but from Mike Colpitz. The 100,000 enabled chargers that you mentioned, is that DC, FC, and AC combined? And is that expected based on NEVI stations coming online? We touched upon it a little bit, but maybe we could clarify that while we have a chance here.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, thanks, Mike. Good question. That is a combination of DC and AC chargers in the North American market. So we see that both.
Awesome. And then we touched upon who's got it, who hasn't, and this is kind of where Scott comes in, I think, with he's got a BMW. He's looking specifically at Iona, but as far as today goes, outside of Electrify America, the Superchargers, as we know, and Iona in its very early iteration, what are the big charging networks and vendors that we'd know that people use on a daily basis that have that plug and charge operational in the field today?
Yeah, so the easy answer is to say, if you go to Hubject's website and the plug and charge tab, there's a drop down and you can see all the OEMs and the models, all the charging networks, and all the EMSPs and chargers that we're working with to implement in the market today. I think a quick rule of thumb is most charging networks that have received NEVI funding are implementing plug and charge with Hubject. Either they're completely onboarded in the cases of many of those networks that you just named, or they're onboarding. A few of you all may have seen, a couple months ago, we made an announcement with ChargePoint as one of our newer partners joining the plug and charge ecosystem. So I'd say stay tuned as those go live, but I would expect a lot of movement between now and the end of the year in terms of the amount of chargers you're able to see plug and charge sessions on in the market.
And this is more of a follow-on from Scott as well, but just to kind of, get that same piece. It reminds me almost of PlugShare, where people are looking at the pips and saying, oh, it looks like a network, and then they look inside, and someone says this has been on here for 3 years. When's it happening? And someone says it's been on here for 2 weeks. Are they actually building this thing? Everybody has very kind of different timelines for expectations, but in terms of it happening now, and obviously it's in the works, we see it behind the scenes perhaps, but what's the, I guess complete is hard because it may never be complete fully, but as far as most drivers can use it in most circumstances and just expect this to be the kind of de facto way they will authenticate a charge, what, if you had to pull a ballpark figure, what kind of day timeline are we looking at?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to shine my crystal ball a little more here. It's hard to pin an exact date. I will say from our perspective, when we make an announcement with a partner, that integration and onboarding is complete typically within, I'd say at longest, 1 year. Now, where there are some variations to this is for a plug-and-charge session to happen, the vehicle has to be enabled, the network has to be enabled, and the charger has to be capable of supporting plug-and-charge. So there is a bit of a magic lineup where all three have to line up, right? So if you have one that doesn't work, then there are some issues, right? I will say, I think we're talking like 2 to 3 years probably of really seeing mass adoption in terms of pulling up, and the majority of chargers you see will be supporting plug-and-charge and having that plug-and-charge session. If it's a DC charger, though, it's more likely to have it than not, particularly with a lot of the NEVI funding and the new networks going in.
And these are more kind of statements that'll bring us on to some of Eric's points. I think the older EV kind of question, but from Mark up in Canada, has there been a commitment by all of the manufacturers, especially in terms of those who've been out there? I mean, obviously, if we go back 5 years and then plus, we're only talking maybe about 10, 15 models, but we have the Bolt EV, we have i3s, and Nissan Leaf maybe thrown in there as well because there are so many on the road. Will older vehicles be capable here? And then there's kind of a segment there that Crazy Postman touches on with Autocharge Plus being beneficial in that kind of, as you said, it's something that can roll out immediately here and has been a bridge for EVgo, even though we see them moving towards plug-and-charge now. Do you see a role for that with some of these older EVs and kind of being something they could use in conjunction with plug-and-charge until they filter out of the market? Lots of stuff in there, so I'll kind of let you speak around the older EVs question and where Autocharge fits in with that, if it does.
Yeah, certainly. No, I think unfortunately the news is if you have an EV that's been on the road now for 5 years, there's a good chance that probably won't be capable. I think the good news is once a brand or a vehicle line or platform launches a plug-and-charge enabled vehicle, typically what we see is most of the other vehicles within the same family or within the same brand are also capable of plug-and-charge. So there are some cases today where there are vehicles on the road that will have plug-and-charge enabled, even though they don't offer it today, or added functionality layered on top of plug-and-charge. But it would be quite difficult or costly to retrofit some of those older EVs, particularly if they're like 2+ years old.
Okay, got you. Thanks for that. Let me see. I want to make sure we get to all of the questions that were asked, at least since I was starring. Did I miss anybody here? Landon at the Arkansas Traveler is saying there seems to have been a parallel between state toll systems, accepting multiple systems from other states, use Florida's SunPass in Oklahoma and Texas. That alleviates quite a bit of fatigue for me in that realm. That kind of hits more on roaming, right? I mean, I know I've been happy to, because we're quite close to Canada, I'll pop up to Quebec or to Ontario, and there's roaming between ChargePoint and flow, electric circuit, some of those. So that's been very easy for me as an international. International is obviously, we're pretty close and we have similar systems and functionality. So maybe it's a stretch, but certainly it was convenient for me not to have to really go into set up every single account in a different country's charging networks. I think part of this starts to come into the convenience factor, right? And the fact that maybe, yes, we have to register, but we get it set up one time and the car becomes the central point of authorization. That's the identity, as you said, with fleets, especially the car and its driver, are the unique key there. So when we're on that kind of topic, it almost breathes into adoption here, right? Because if at the moment we have to say to people that, to Eric's point, we have X number of networks, we have all these apps, your car can do it, but this other car can't do it. Maybe you have two different EVs in your driveway, one can, one can't. What kind of impact do you see as it gets to the point where we are close to that 2-3 years, if the crystal ball is shined up right and that occurs, what impact do you see Plug&Charge having on wider EV adoption?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And it's frustrating, right? Like I think on my phone, I do a lot of testing. I do a lot of cross-country road trips. And I think I probably have like $100 spread across probably like 10 wallets that I'll probably never extract from some more geographically challenging networks. But I think as Plug&Charge enabled vehicles continue to hit the road, it becomes increasingly clear that the authentication question has been solved. Then naturally you do have to be able to authorize those sessions, right? And I think what we're hearing from a lot of our partners, particularly a lot of our automotive OEM partners, a lot of our fleet fuel card provider partners, is they don't want to go out and do 20 different technical integrations between their EMSP solution and all the different charging networks out there. And they're coming to companies or hubs like Hubject and saying, hey, Hubject, can you help support me so that we can enable roaming for our customers all the way around the world? And of course we say, yeah, we'd love to. And we go to these markets and then we go to charging networks and we say, hey, we have, this many drivers. We really want to help enable roaming. Will you join? And together, can we build this platform that allows everyone to charge seamlessly through Plug&Charge authentication and then through a roaming authorization? And so I think the good news is Plug&Charge has helped initiate a lot of the roaming conversations in North America, particularly the last year as those NEVI funds hit. And I think, going into 2025, it feels like every week now I'm talking to 3 to 5 charging networks that reach out and say, hey, Nate, we're really interested in roaming. Can we sit down and chat? We really have this utilization problem where we want more drivers to be able to access our charge points and vice versa, folks that want to be able to find and access and route towards charge points as well. So I think Plug&Charge did a really good job setting up those conversations within North America. And I think I expect to see a lot of continued progress in this, in 2025 and 2026 as well.
So it does feel like we're kind of hitting where the rubber meets the road now. I mean, you mentioned 2019. I mean, I think one of the Electrify America announcements, I've been aware of Hubject because of that since 2019 in those early days. But, there was very little happening in the interim there other than a few kind of key models, one of which was Ford. And Yoli Traveler asks, he touched upon really the Ford Plug&Charge being paid for through the Ford Pass app. I know for a while there were some gaps with people wanting to be on a discounted plan, so a Pass Plus with Electrify America, but they would get charged the full rate for the, if they used Plug&Charge, they were paying more. It was convenient, but then they couldn't get their discounts locked in. There's a lot of those kind of coming through, and I'm sure we'll see more of them as the networks come across. What kind of functionality or considerations are taken there for promotional plans, different forms of pricing, anything like that can be built into the Plug&Charge setup?
Yeah, so I think it goes back to defining the product and the functionality. With Plug&Charge solely being authentication, the loyalty piece or the idea of actually price setting doesn't occur within that that product or functionality. That's actually on the roaming side, because that's where you have the money flow, and that's where you see those B2B money transfers between, well, really it's B2C between the driver and the EMSP, and then the EMSP to the CPO as a B2B, right? In terms of Hubject or in our functionality, we have that ability. Like, we have that capability to be able to support specialized pricing offers for our partners. And that's a functionality that we can support. And that's a functionality that we continue to hear a lot of interest in. I think there's also a lot of interest in how can you tie your loyalty account to your network, right? As you go out and charge, it's becoming increasingly relevant as we see a lot of these C-stores and fuel retailers stand up charging operations as well. And so for us, that's always on the back of our mind, and that's always, we're always thinking, how can we do more to continue to support those features and functionalities. But from our side, I don't think there'll be too many issues.
Okay. And I want to give Eric and Walter some space here, but I'm also making sure, because the crowd are asking so many questions, I keep up with them. Scott has a few different scenarios here, but specifically because this one works with BMW and there's a German kind of context there. Mercedes-Benz chargers say on them at the moment that they support Plug&Charge. His BMW supports Plug&Charge, but he cannot combine the two and charge with Plug&Charge out of Mercedes-Benz high-powered charging. So I think he's looking at right now the implementation. Are we still going to expect in the kind of period where we are getting progress here that there are going to be a lot of these kind of gaps where one hasn't quite caught up with the other? Or is there going to be a kind of good cut point where most of the big networks are just switching across and it works from a kind of, not universal, because that's not the word to use, but certainly you can expect everything, everybody has been on board with Plug&Charge, and you're going to be able to go and with confidence use the system at those networks that are just about getting there.
Yeah, no, I would say keep an eye out throughout. Thinking of our relationships and being cognizant of all of our partners. I would say continue to keep an eye out as we progress through 2025. I think you're going to see a lot more opportunities and use cases here in the near future to continue to use that plug-and-charge functionality on multiple networks and across multiple brands. So I think we're already starting to see that push towards being able to cross use. So is it going to be next week or tomorrow? No. Am I going to start seeing more of this in the next 3 months, 6 months, 9 months? Yes. Especially once again, like, keep in mind, like, I think we get so caught up, Nevi, people talk about, oh, well, there's not many chargers hit the ground or there's no deployment, but actually from our perspective, it did a lot to push the industry forward into adopting Plug&Charge, into adopting 15118, and to interoperability. I think the thing to keep in mind is these integrations and these connections can take time. But once they happen, it's a really great driver experience, and there's a lot going on behind the scenes.
I think that should be as comforting as anything else, because we know once that happens, that progress happens very slowly, then all at once, right? So I want to be mindful of your time and giving the other chaps a quick opportunity to add any last questions. So maybe one each, Eric and Walter, if they're direct, and then we can see what's what.
Yeah, I just had a quick one too, in terms of that Hubject's brand, based on kind of like Scott's comment too, like your brand identity and how it reflects for the customers. Because as Steve likes to say, cheers nerds. We're all kind of nerds on this channel, seeing that sort of back end, what's going on. But from the customer experience, are you really looking to be known that much by the end user, or is it more important that they just have that universal experience that everything works the way they want it to work every time?
It's the latter. I think in a best case scenario, a driver pulls into a charger, they have seamless authentication, they have seamless authorization, and they never see our logo, they never interact with us, they never even know about us. I think for us, we see our role as an integrator, and as an ecosystem operator. And the less problems there are, the better.
And Nate, you've done a superb job of answering the questions, and I know it's late, so you've been a terrific guest. Definitely appreciate the effort and participation. There's something that I've ferreted out, and it seems like big money has been injected here from the grid operators in order to provide something called PMAX schedules or smart charging. And as I understand, as a summer heat wave starts to sink its teeth in, and there's the potential for rolling brownouts, blackouts, they could send signals to cars to only request a certain amount of charging from the grid, thereby alleviating some of the activity of electrons flowing to DC fast chargers, at least to some extent. At least that's how I understand the technology. And I actually felt as though that was one of the driving factors of this technology being put in place. Although there's customer-facing benefits, actually the driving factor in the back end was because grid connectors need some kind of hook in order to dial this stuff down during times of need. Is that a misrepresentation, or is that pretty accurate?
I think that ISO 15118 as a standard has laid the groundwork and the foundations to address some of those vehicle to charger communications that are referenced in kind of the scenario that you just mentioned. I think today, in terms of use cases on the ground and functionality, it is very much focused on that driver experience. That said, I think it's on everyone's mind that the automotive or the EV folks don't exactly talk a lot with the energy folks. And there's always more opportunities to bridge that gap and to work together. And I think 15.11.8 is going to be a really a great talking point to help drive some of that together, right? And I would suspect we'll see more of this over the next couple of years.
Understood. Thank you very much.
So I'm reliably informed. I'm sucking on hopium for being so positive on Plug&Charge. But I think if you look at it's a nice little summary there. If you look at 2019 to say 2024, like a solid 5-year period where not a whole lot happened other than maybe Ford and a little bit of VW with Plug&Charge. And now in the last 6 months, 12 months, we've seen all the stuff that Nate's talked about. I think you're starting to see that, rubber meets the road and getting some traction here. So I think that's a positive way to sign off. Thank you, Nate, for going through the weeds with us where we needed it and giving us the kind of more top-down view that everybody hopefully can take away where we are and where we're going in the next kind of 12, 24 months. Anything we should know? I know you're at EVCS in Las Vegas next week, so that'll be an opportunity if anyone's in the industry or just in the area to connect and learn a bit more about Hubject. They can go to hubject.com as well. Anything you want to call out kind of coming up or what to watch for from you guys?
Yeah, I think from our side, first and foremost, Steve, really appreciate taking the time and reaching out. I thoroughly enjoyed this and enjoyed the dialogue and all the great questions from the chat. So appreciate all of that. I think things to keep an eye on or to look out for. Probably three main events on my map for the year. So next week we'll be at the EV Charging Summit. We'll also be at ACT Expo late April, if anyone's will be there. And the third and final event is Hubject actually hosts a global charging event every year called ICNC. We bring together about 5,000 charging nerds to showcase and highlight all the best in charging interoperability. So if anyone wants to go to Berlin, Germany in September, we'd love to have you join us. We're always looking to how we can continue to grow and expand our ecosystem. And, I think all together, we slowly but surely make improvements to have better EV charging and a truly seamless charging experience.
I think September in Germany with EV Nerds, a Stein, and some Bratwurst. Sounds about as good as it gets for me, but maybe that is too much. Cheers, nerds. But you can definitely check that out here. It's in the Berlin Tempelhof, interchargenetworkconference.com, with hyphens between the words there. So worth checking out. And as Nate mentioned, you can go to hubject.com to find the various partnerships. All of these things that we're talking about and the traction ahead here is going to be on the website there. Nate, thanks so much for joining us. And we're going to continue on here afterwards and chat with some of the nerds and see if we can unpack any final questions. But really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks all. Cheers.
Thank you, Nate.
Alrighty, I hope we got through as much as the expert stuff as we can handle. We're going to hang out still. We have a little bit more time. Nate was very succinct with some of those answers. So for the first time in a long time, we've met the hour kind of criteria with our guest. I was very impressed with that. I want to jump through the comments, but let's see. I guess summing up, Scott, thanks for prompting this, and thanks, Nate. Now go get this deployed. Hurry up. I do think how much how much do we think that is the case, that this is kind of actually happening now versus what we've seen over previous 5 years beforehand? Is this something that is just was waiting for this kind of catalyst, whether it's NEVI, whether it's a certain point of adoption? I don't know. What do you think? Eric, you've been in this game the longest, for such as it is. What do you think the timeline is looking like?
Well, I think we're at that, to pardon the term, that congealing stage, right? Like we're finally getting to that point of having a universal plug, a universal standard. Everybody's all on the same page. But then also something that never really happened before is profitability from these networks. And so now it's becoming more and more like, for the last 10 years or so, it was Tesla using the Superchargers as a marketing vehicle, right? And that it was a competitive advantage for their company, but it's a cost center. Now we're getting numbers from EVgo that they're profitable. Now we're getting forward outlook from like ChargePoint that even they are profitable. And so once you start getting to the point where you're competing to provide a service, and you have these universal standards, I think we're going to see things accelerate very, very quickly, because nobody wants to be left behind. And even if you have 50% of the population that doesn't want plug-and-charge and would rather just pay with a credit card, you still want to have that competitive advantage of being able to offer a service at least on par with, if not better than, the competing networks.
I mean, if I think about my experiences at the authentication piece, as we kind of clarified, is really what we're talking about. But it's not that difficult for me at a Rivian Rivian Adventure Network. Feels good. That was a good seamless process. ChargePoint has always been very, very good at the NFC piece for whatever issues they have with hardware and touchscreen lagginess, that kind of thing. It's always been very easy to activate a charge. I think having experienced Autocharge Plus, I would say that has been the better of the two, but it's quite close in terms of timing, at least. I guess the piece that both of them solve is you don't have to figure out, like with an app, you have to figure out which stall is which machine is a certain number or a name if it's EVgo. That all starts to add time and futzing around. They've started to solve some of that with stuff like Iona's bays being numbered, but I think there's the piece where it makes it really easy to just kind of not think about anywhere you plug in, just getting right plugged in and off to the races. That starts to cut down the time.
Yeah, but and that's always been my point, though, is you have to go to the dispenser to get your plug anyway, right? You are physically at the dispenser picking up a physical plug. So it, like, the difference between that and swiping an NFC, an RFID, or a credit card is just a very small difference in convenience, in my opinion. Now, app is way below that. Once you have to break out an app and start using it, it ruins the entire experience, in my opinion.
Walter, if you have to rank these as various ways to start a charge with authentication, which is your go-to, and then which last?
Yeah, well, I've been stuck in app hell multiple times, one of which was at a Tesla Supercharger that had far too many stalls for its own good, and they weren't numbered. So I actually had no way of starting a charge because you had to select which charger it was in order to start the charge. And I was staring at 60 of them, so I could have hunted and pecked to see if it started or not. So Plug&Charge definitely would have been nice there. And also lots of newer CPOs are not labeling. We've mentioned Iona is, but lots of the other CPOs are not labeling their chargers as well. And I've seen multiple videos where people will post up to a charging station and they pull up the app and they have no idea which charger they're at or what cable to select. And these are people who are hardened EV travelers, and they're spending 7-8 minutes just trying to figure out which one to choose in the app. And I think it's telling that Iona does not have an app yet. They've got all the money in the world. They're coming with first-class charging experience, but app is on the back burner. And I think that's a very telling moment for the EV charging industry that they have partnered with Hubject. Publicly, that's a press release. And I think they found a path to just do away with the whole concept of an app in order to start a charge, because similarly in a gas car, unless you're going in order to prepay in the store at the cashier, you don't need to know what gas pump you're at. And EV charging should not be more complicated than it need be.
So I think it's interesting as well, because when we had the Electric Era guys on who have signed up with Hubject, they were talking, they don't have an app, or at least it was a very kind of confusing point of the conversation for some people in the live chat. Like, so do they have an app? Are they a CPO? Are they a network? Obviously, Eric, you've visited those sites, but they are, essentially you can tap and pay and do that side of things, right? But the app obviously isn't something that you missed. I think for one of our previous guests, Jacob Espinoza, Ali Penguin 1 over in New Mexico, he had a complaint that visiting the site that it wasn't, he had some of his authentication pieces failed and he wasn't able to get into the app, and one of the Electric Era sites wasn't working for him. So there's kind of both sides of the story there. What do you think on that side, Eric, from that kind of, like Iona really, who hasn't gone the app route right out of the gate? They've just started to move towards some of the more traditional ways.
Yeah, I think I don't miss the apps at all, right? And like I said, a lot of times too, you don't know if you're blaming the network or the phone service, right? When you're talking about like activating an app, and the credit card has always been sort of my preferred method of paying. And with Electric Era, they're placing them at gas stations, and so you really are getting almost the identical experience that you would get using a gas station, except for the option of getting a discounted rate by going in and paying cash. And I think it was possibly Electrify America's single biggest mistake when they rolled out, is saying we're only going to do credit card readers that aren't working properly and an app, right? And every other payment option is off the table initially. And the app made things better to compensate for the credit card readers, but the credit card readers just should have worked in the first place. And if they didn't, they should have done an RFID card, and they chose to not go that route. And then of course, Plug&Charge would have been, it was promised for many, many years, and they just never implemented it. But yeah, I think at this point, people are probably done with apps. Even the ABB chargers, I believe it was Kyle without a SPEC that did a feature on that when he visited an ABB booth. I forget what show he was at, but they have a QR code that you just take a picture of it, and it will link you to a web-based real-time status of your charging session. and that's all you need. And then you just take it with you. You take your phone out, you take a picture of the RFID, you have a web-based real-time update of your charging status, and you go do whatever it is you need to do. And you don't need an additional app. You don't need, it's just your browser and your phone. And I think that's actually the much better solution than having a discrete app that you have to download, maintain, add payment information to, personal information to. I think that's just unnecessary at this point.
So I think, I mean, Kempower has that kind of feature as well, right? That was a big thing right out the gate. Crazy Postman's point was the printed QR codes, security risk, but then
on the screen is safe. Yeah. When they're generated on the fly, they're safe.
Right. Because you're not having someone stick over a fake one that's going to rip you off as you try and make that payment. Gotcha. So we have from Landon, Walter once said, if you want to know what something EV charging related will be like in the future, in Europe.
I just need to qualify that. Actually, I was quoting someone else.
It certainly wasn't me. I would say California.
No, also Europe. Way ahead. Apart from maybe some of the Buckies and those kind of things. We don't have very good brisket, I'm sure, in the northwest of the UK. But,
well, didn't California secede and join the EU?
Well, if you're part of so that would make Canada not the 51st state.
50th.
The 50th, then. Oh dear, it's all gone wrong. Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of roaming in Europe, to Nate's kind of point about, there's something called plug surfing, which had a lot of accounts leaned into one piece in the UK, which is more my kind of where I've actually done travel. You can certainly do a lot of contactless payments. That was kind of ahead of its time in Europe. It was there a lot quicker than the States rolled it out. So that has been kind of the de facto way to make a payment. I don't think Plug&Charge is especially widespread any more than it is over here. I'd have to go back and check, but I think certainly the sentiment here seems to be move beyond apps, and I can start to get a feel for this. Like, I didn't feel it was that big a deal until I had to reload them on my phone, and I started to realize that by far the biggest folder is my app folder, right? I mean, you only need to go to Plug&Charge, PlugShare to see how many networks there are. That's just the ones that PlugShare deems, suitable enough to actually have a filter to show that there are 36, 37, whatever it is now, plus all of the rest. So I think probably most of us are okay with apps being the final kind of. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say in Europe, right? Didn't Mercedes kind of pioneer that, where they managed a single payment app portal for their customers, so that it was basically a universal roaming, but I think it was exclusively for the European market.
Yeah, John's actually from the UK, so he's got the UK has government regulations for contactless payment. So not much Plug&Charge there. Thanks for that. That's appreciated, because I think the contactless piece there kind of overlaps with the Nevi point, right? I mean, it seems strange to say, that Nevi did this in a way, because, there's at the moment 64, 65 stations out there, actually active. So how could they make that difference? But it's really kind of goes back to that point of Nevi set a lot of people thinking about the bigger picture. So even if it's not going to be, Nevi is not supposed to be a network in itself. It's not supposed to be the backbone of US charging infrastructure. It's supposed to be something that gets everybody to come together and say, here's how we do this, because we're looking at it from a 10,000 foot view rather than my state's done this. Oh, turns out this state didn't do this, and everybody kind of messes it up then.
Well, and I was going to say, I don't see them as being mutually exclusive. And maybe to John's point, too, that was the other thing that did come out of California. I know we said it was joking, right? Like, no, California doesn't set the trends, but that was a huge area of contention between California and Tesla. And in fact, it was a reason Tesla wasn't able to complete a lot of their public grants, is because California set that regulation into the law. It's not contact. I guess, would you consider credit card, is that synonymous with contactless payment? Or,
yeah, because I mean, it's a tap to pay.
It's a tap.
Right?
Yeah,
phone card, whatever you have on your pocket or wallet.
But the result of that regulation from like 3-4 years ago in California, 5 years ago in California, was that they didn't want to impede any potential pathway for payment. So even if it meant that you could call in and have them activate the charge, they needed to open up that option so that people weren't priced into having to have an account or an app with a specific charging provider just in order to charge their EV. So it's a very similar, I think, mindset between what was happening in the UK and what was happening in California. And it means that Plug&Charge becomes less of a priority once you prioritize non-account required, touchless pay. So,
I think the sentiment there is that we have to check back on this. Folks are asking, can Nate come back? And aside from the roaming piece, which I kind of want to delve into myself now, the point there is that we'll have to keep checking back, just like we'll have to keep checking back on stuff like Nevi's progress or other pieces that are still kind of changing so fast. We'll have to. It becomes more of a check the website, check the partnerships, check who's actually done this and activated versus who hasn't. But the fact that it's actually changing, hopefully that regularly, is a good sign in and of itself. So I don't want to belabor that point. I think we have a good kind of cap on that. Any final kind of pieces that you guys want to raise? Anything you want to point towards for your respective channels and efforts at the moment? Walter, you've got some stuff.
No, still kind of meandering along with a limping alternative fuels data center database. So I'm not seeing anything spectacular coming out of them, but I'm still going to try to maintain status quo as long as I can. So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, and I have some big updates coming soon, but I'm not going to spoil them yet. So
does it involve the thing
Sorry,
behind
nerds. Oh well, that's one potential aspect of it. Yeah. So
good. We're excited to see those, and I would imagine Williams, California, is another place on your list very soon. For myself, I am. Let's see, what date is it? Middle of March. Hopefully I'm only 2 or 3 weeks away from having an Ioniq 5 again. That's something I need to do some more videos on, but Hyundai has been good, if nothing else, in communicating what's going on and covering my rentals. Unfortunately, I'm at the moment in a gas Jeep, which my wife is driving. That's just 1 week bridge. The Polestar 2 is behind us and something else is ahead of us, so a little more magical mystery tour of some other EV until we get the Ioniq back. But other than that, I'll publish what I can, but nobody wants to see a gas Jeep firing up, so we'll leave. Maybe I'll moan about that a little bit, but
do a video about how difficult it is to fuel it.
Yes, it's not been fun. My wife almost ran out the other day because she's so used to plugging in at home. So let's see. Before we head out, I want to echo that. Thank you, Walter, for keeping the Friday updates going. The one Friday that I missed or that wasn't there because of the AFDC was kind of a lacking morning with my coffee, so I appreciate it. Same from Rob H. He likes seeing the Friday alternative fuel center database updates. Even if they're going a bit slower, such it is, we'll appreciate them and enjoy seeing the stations, right? So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you for your comments, questions, etc., etc., etc. We will be back in 2 weeks' time when we actually have a few guests lined up now, so I'll probably be able to tell you most of them by the time we get there. But next one, we'll have Rob Hoffman from the Urban EV podcast, who is down in New York City. We will be talking about curbside charging, which is starting to come into Boston. We had It's Electric join us recently, adding Flow. Voltpost, I think, is going down to Connecticut. So plenty to talk about there, and back to AC charging after a bit of a DC stretch here. So thank you all for joining. Thank you, Eric and Walter. And for one little bit of a time here, cheers, nerds.